fatigue?
I think there's just like a COVID fatigue. So like whenever a new story comes up, they're going to latch onto it. They've already announced in our office that once the public will be open to it, we're going to start focusing mainly on climate, climate like global warming, and like that's going to be our next like I don't know, like what's the word I'm looking for? It's going to be our focus. Like our focus was to get Trump out of office, right? Without saying it, that's what it was, right? So our next thing is going to be for climate change awareness.
What does that look like?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I have a feeling it's just going to be like constantly showing videos of like decline in ice and weather warming up and like the effects it's having on the economy and really
Who
diving
decides that?
the head of the network, like just
Who's that? Is that Zucker?
Zucker, yeah. I imagine that he's got his council and they've all like discussed like where they think
So that's like the next
pandemic like story like that will be to death. But that one's got longevity. You know what I mean? It's not like there's a definitive ending to the pandemic, or like it'll taper off to a point that it's not a problem anymore. I think it's going to take years, so they'll probably be able to milk that for quite a bit. So.
The climate emergency became the new pandemic. Carbon emissions reached a critical point, and humans were close to extinction. Human movement was thwarted, and new lockdown measures restricted us further. But most seemed to become complacent to it, embracing their imprisonment. Traveling was banned, and we had reached a point where even breathing air was a crime. Food production became completely regulated. Farming was illegal. This was expected to save the planet and save us from extinction. With food production levels heavily monitored and people's bodies wired, they could now be fully automated. AI had become the perfect data dialysis machine tool, working inside the human body and feeding all the data back to the central AI system. They had found what they now needed to create the next world. We had pandemic after pandemic, ranging from various variants to cyber attacks, a climate crisis and a war between the East and West. The fear machine was everlasting. What started as the protection of our health soon evolved into hell on Earth. Humans' higher sensory perception had been prevented from developing naturally and was invaded by a parasitic force. The reality was that most people were simply still in a state of shock and paralysis that their governments could act in such a barbaric manner. The climate emergency became the modern-day illusion of a crusade, and they believed they were doing God's work in the eyes of their masters. All of society, including the leaders who led the kings and queens, would be slaughtered after the central AI was built. However, even they seemed ignorant and still masqueraded in society's pantomime. Every single person on every level was sleepwalking into the jaws of hell. They pushed every piece of fear they could, and we had to be strong to get through those days. Not least because of them, but because of the reaction of everyone else. People policed each other in every aspect of life, mainly due to their own personal breakdowns within and not being able to have any control of the situation. This was not the science. This was a technocratic takeover only leading us to a dead dystopian society where we could barely exist.
An illusion will be created so vast, so large that it escapes their perception. Those who see it will be thought of as insane. We will always stand above the relative field of their experience, for we know the secrets of the absolute. We will work together always, and we will remain bound by blood and secrecy.
A Canadian patient is the first in the world to be diagnosed with climate change. A senior citizen from Nelson in British Columbia suffered from breathing trouble and was said to be suffering due to the effects of climate change. Doctors said heat waves and poor air quality were responsible for her condition. Dr. Kyle Merritt was responsible for the diagnosis, which is reportedly the first ever to document a patient as suffering due to climate change.
If you believe climate change is really out here killing people, something is really wrong with you. And I always say, I'm never calling you stupid. They are. They're the people you believe in. You couldn't go outside because of the virus. Then you couldn't go outside because the unvaccinated didn't want to get the vaccine. Now you just can't go outside, period, without being scared that you could just die from climate change. That is crazy, bruh. Wake up before it's too late, y'all.
Administration's ambitious plan to address the existential threat of our time, climate change. Folks, we're in a crisis. Just like we need to be a unified nation in response to COVID-19, we need a unified national response to climate change. And from this crisis, from these crises, I should say, we need to seize the opportunity to build back and build back better than we were before.
So at the end of 2021, I had a hypothesis, and that was that to step it up from lockdowns, it must probably go to blackouts. I thought that because, of course, United Nations Agenda 21, 2030, the Great Reset, stipulates climate change as the primary motivation for global governance for a new world order. So that was 6 months ago. You can see the pinned video in this profile as proof. Now, of course, a few weeks ago, they said that there will be power outages and blackouts across America and indeed across a lot of the world. Isn't that interesting? So what's the purpose of blackouts? Well, firstly, it's about creating a sense of trauma, right? Psychological pressure, just as lockdowns do. Blackouts essentially cause fear and panic, and in that process, you're more malleable and you can be readapted and reconditioned. And centralization of resources and energy use going away from the old grid. That's why they've let the old grid die.
One of the giants in the history of the philosophy of science, Karl Popper, once famously observed that a theory that explains everything explains nothing. And to be sure, the theory of catastrophic anthropogenic climate change appears to explain everything. After all, we all know that climate change makes for shorter winters, except for when it makes for harsher winters. And climate change means less snow, except for when climate change means more snow. And climate change causes droughts in California and floods in Texas and Oklahoma, and generally makes wet places wetter and dry places drier, except when it makes wet places drier and dry places wetter. And climate change causes more hurricanes at the same time as it causes less hurricanes. Climate change causes more rain but less water, and less rain but more water. Climate change decreases the spread of malaria at the same time as it increases the spread of malaria, but don't worry, the Terminator himself advises us not to listen to those climate change cynics. Hey guys? Do I need to go on? Oh, okay. Climate change makes San Francisco foggier. Climate change makes San Francisco less foggy. Climate change causes duller autumn leaves. Climate change causes more colorful autumn leaves. Climate change makes for less salty seas. Climate change makes for saltier seas. Climate change causes the polar ice caps to melt. Climate change causes the polar ice caps to freeze. Climate change makes the Earth hotter, unless the Earth isn't getting hotter, in which case climate change can explain that too. What's the problem here? This sounds like the perfect scientific theory. It can explain literally everything, including self-contradictory things. This means it's absolutely perfect, isn't it?
Death will come to he who speaks. We will keep their lifespans short and their minds weak while pretending to do the opposite. We will use our knowledge of science and technology in subtle ways so they will never see what is happening. We will use soft metals, aging accelerators and sedatives in food and water, also in the air. They will be blanketed by poisons everywhere they turn. The soft metals will cause them to lose their minds. We will promise to find a cure from our many fronts, yet we will feed them more poison. The poisons will be absorbed through their skin and mouths. They will destroy their minds and reproductive systems. For all this, their children will be born dead, and we will conceal this information.
Imagine that we live in an age of reason, and the global warming alarm is dressed up as science, but it's not science. It's propaganda.
There's no direct evidence which links 20th century global warming to anthropogenic greenhouse gases.
We're just being told lies. That's what it comes down to.
You can't say that CO2 will drive climate. It certainly never did in the past.
If the CO2 increases in the atmosphere as a greenhouse gas, then the temperature will go up. But the ice core record shows exactly the opposite. So the fundamental assumption, the most fundamental assumption of the whole theory of climate change due to humans is shown to be wrong.
The whole thing stinks.
Man-made global warming is no longer just a theory about climate. It is the defining moral and political cause of our age. Campaigners say the time for debate is over. Any criticism, no matter how scientifically rigorous, is illegitimate. Even worse, dangerous.
The United Nations has warned the world is on a catastrophic pathway to a hotter planet.
If we don't get serious about climate change today, it will be too late for our children to do so tomorrow.
World-leading scientists say we're closer than ever to doomsday, what they call 100 seconds to midnight. It's a stark warning for humanity, and one that sparked the idea behind a giant steel box that's about to begin recording everything we say and do about climate change.
There's a horrific nature to this idea, the notion of an end. But at the same time, the positivity of everyone being on record, so much like a black box in any plane, you're glad it's there when you're flying.
Scientists, artists, engineers and architects have come together to create a black box for the Earth, built to outlive us all. But the creators behind the project say all hope is not lost.
In a way, the purpose of the box is not to sort of say, well, we're doomed and that's the end of it. It's actually to say, whatever we do from now on, we're going to record anyway. So maybe there's an opportunity to take action which prevents that catastrophe.
The box will be up to 15 metres in length and 4 metres high. It's made from reinforced steel and is solar powered. Inside, hard drives will store 500 scientific data measurements, from the acidification of the ocean to the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. Rainfall, ice thickness and temperature records will also be stored. An algorithm will gather contextual data, newspaper headlines, social media activity and transcripts of speeches from world leaders.
It's never been all put into one place. It's always been sort of sectionalized in various different sources. And the idea is for every measurement, we will record more than one measure.
The creators considered locations around the world for the black box, but it's here in Tasmania's rugged west where they found the perfect spot for what they needed. It's remote, as well as geographically and politically stable. And despite the area being known for its wild conditions, they say it can survive every possible natural threat.
Give birth, we will inject poisons into the blood of their children and convince them that it's for their health. We will start early on, when their minds are young. We will target their children with what children love most, sweet things. When their teeth decay, we will fill them with metals that will kill their minds and steal their future. When their ability to learn has been affected, we will create medicines that will make them sicker and cause other diseases for which we will create yet more medicine. We will render them docile and weak, so they succumb to us and our power. They will grow depressed, slow and obese. And when they come to us for help, we will give them more poison. We will focus their attention towards money and material goods, so that they may never connect with their inner self. We will distract them with fornication, external pleasures, and games so that they may never be one with the oneness of all. Their minds will belong to us, and they will do as we say. If they refuse, we shall find ways to implement mind-altering technology into their lives.
Today's climate engineers can create wildfires, they can create rain and snowstorms, and they can even manipulate the stratosphere to cool down the Earth, which is exactly what our buddy Bill Gates is gearing up to do. He's backing a Harvard experiment called ScopeX that aims to spray the stratosphere with particles in order to block out the sun and cool down the Earth's surface. Yeah, that's right. As early as next year, we're going to be living out the plot from Snowpiercer.
First, the weather changed.
The deniers knew why, but they still doomed us with their lies. War made the earth even hotter. Her ice melted, and all her species crashed. So the men of science tried to cool the earth, to reverse the damage they had sown. Instead, they froze her to the core.
If we don't take action, the collapse of our civilization...
Before COVID, climate change was the big crisis.
What I'm saying is the planet's on fire.
When COVID is conquered, climate change will be the big crisis again. Saying it's not a crisis makes some people mad. Students at Georgetown University honked horns to prevent others from hearing Mark Morano say it.
They do not want dissent. They shout you down at schools.
What do we want?
Climate justice! Georgetown police said they'd never seen an event shut down like that before.
How dare you?
Of course young people fear climate change. They've been frightened about it since they were little.
Rising sea levels would displace millions.
It's an indoctrination that's so complete that by the time they get to high school, they're not even aware that there's any scientific dissent.
I do go to a class of 16, 17-year-olds in school and start talking to them about climate, and they are amazed to hear that there is an alternative point of view.
Climate justice! Now! These students don't want to listen, but Morano's new movie, Climate Hustle 2, includes facts they should hear. Politicians should hear them too.
If we would do more on climate change, we'd have fewer of these hurricanes and other types of storms. Everyone knows that.
No, everyone doesn't know that. Listen to Congress's own hearings.
Are hurricanes increasing?
In the United States and globally, no.
Are tornadoes increasing?
There's no evidence to suggest that they've been increased.
Are droughts increasing?
According to the EPA and according to the IPCC, the answer is no.
You wouldn't know that watching CNN.
There will be irreversible damage to the planet.
The media do hype every scare. And when Morano says they exaggerate the risks, they call him evil personified, a climate denier.
Why should we believe you? You get money from the fossil fuel industry. ExxonMobil, Chevron funded.
Yeah. You're not?
Not at all. I am paid by over about 90% individual contributions from around the country. Why would ExxonMobil give me money? And we would gladly accept the money, but they're not interested. They want to appear green.
Cut their greenhouse gas emissions in half.
Morano's movie also frustrates activists because it points out how hypocritical some of them are.
Ladies and gentlemen, the thrice-nominated Leonardo DiCaprio.
I try to live a green lifestyle, quote unquote. I mean, I've done the things that I can do in my house to make my house green, energy efficient appliances. I drive a hybrid car.
Bet he didn't drive his hybrid to
a billionaire summer party in Sicily with celebs like Leonardo DiCaprio, Katy Perry, all in attendance. They all came together to discuss, wait for it, you guys want to guess? Don't read the prompter, don't read. Okay, global warming. I know.
Got it.
Okay. Did everyone miss the memo on this?
It's like me promoting weight loss and eating a cheeseburger.
They just don't walk the walk when it comes to that lifestyle.
I like watching Morano point out celebrities' hypocrisy, but one point in his movie probably goes too far.
Stopping climate change is not about saving the planet. It's about climate elites trying to convince us to accept a future where they call all the shots.
Your movie suggests this world government conspiracy that they want to rule us, but I think they are genuinely concerned and they want to save us. Their vision of saving us is putting them in charge.
And if they're in charge, says the movie, they'll destroy capitalism.
We've got to go straight to the heart of capitalism and overthrow it.
Some even say that prosperity's bad.
Coronavirus. Who could have thought that someone could say this is a wonderful thing?
Because there is less trade, there's less travel.
Former UN climate chief Cristina Figueres has said it could be a good thing for the climate. There's a whole degrowth movement calling for planned recessions.
He's the CEO of the Weather Channel now. I was the founder of the Weather Channel, not the co-founder.
And I'm glad you did, because I am addicted to the Weather Channel. I watch a lot of cable news.
Now, hold on just a minute, I'm not done. And CNN has taken a very strong position on global warming that it is a consensus. Well, there is no consensus in science. Science isn't a vote. Science is about facts. And if you get down to the hard, cold facts, there's no question about it. Climate change is not happening. There is no significant man-made global warming now. There hasn't been any in the past, and there's no reason to expect any in the future. There's a whole lot of baloney, and yes, it has become a big political point of the Democratic Party and part of their platform, and I regret it's become political instead of scientific, but the science is on my side.
I don't think we're going to come to a conclusion about the topic right here. What I do wonder,
I know
though, is
we're
when
not,
you
because
see
you wouldn't allow it to happen on CNN. But I'm happy that I got on the
we've
air
been
and got a
talking here for
chance to
several
talk
minutes.
to your viewers. Hello, everybody. There is no global warming.
What I do wonder is when you see the government, when you see NASA, when you see other institutions say that 97% of climate scientists agree, do you think they're making it up? What I don't understand is how you
Well,
square
that's a manipulated figure, and let me explain it to you. The government puts out about $2.5 billion directly for climate research every year. It only gives that money to scientists who will produce scientific results that support the global warming hypothesis of the Democrat Party position. So they don't have any choice. If you're going to get the money, you got to support their position. Therefore, 97% of the scientific reports published support global warming. Why? Because those are the ones the government pays for, and that's where the money is. It's real simple, but that doesn't mean it's right. That doesn't make it true. That only makes it bought and paid for. The money goes in circles.
I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to try to refute you on
that's
the facts.
the truth.
I'll simply say that the
please
vast
stand
majority...
back from this issue and let the two sides be on the air.
People, look, this is the power of branding. Use of colour, typography, messaging, language. It's called marketing, people. In 2009, look at the temperatures. Look, have a look. Right? Higher than 2022, but they've done it in red and fire and orange, because red is way more scary than this kind of like average, dull beige colour. Blue makes you feel safe. But there's blue with the contrast and the red. It's on fire. The country's on fire. And it's actually cooler. So, I don't think so, mate. I don't fucking think so. Shall I go get my tinfoil hat? Hang on.
What does it mean? Well, we're learning that a World Health Organization staffer has written a report saying that a climate lockdown could be called for. Just like a COVID lockdown, a climate lockdown. Mark Morano is an author who has written a lot about climate change. He founded Climate Depot. He joins us tonight. Mark, thanks so much for coming on. A climate lockdown. Now, I would laugh this off the table, except we all just lived through the last 18 months, so we know that anything is possible. What does this mean exactly?
Well, in my book, Green Fraud, I detail 2 chapters on this, Tucker. This is the climate activists were, first of all, jealous when the COVID lockdowns happened. They were beside themselves saying, how is this happening? Everyone from Greta Thunberg to John Kerry, UN officials. And then they started saying, we need to follow this. If we can shut down for a virus, we can shut down for climate. And that's what we're seeing. There's even academics in Australia proposing adding climate change to death certificates. And Bill Gates has said the death toll will be greater. So they're following every step of the way. And it's not just, a professor here or someone in academia. We have a major UK report coming out. We have an international agency report that came out calling for essentially the same type of lockdowns. Everything from restrictions on your thermostat to restrictions of moving. You can only fly in a climate emergency when it's, quote, morally justifiable. Kind of like a lockdown, you have to justify going to the store for essential services. They're going after freedom of movement. They're going after private car ownership. They're going after everything it means to be a free person and turning it over to the administrative state.
Would this include shutting down the iPhone factories in China? Would China and India participate in this climate lockdown, or is it kind of you first, America?
Well, as we know, the lockdowns had never been proposed. We felt like lemmings following the Chinese Communist Party in terms of them recommending lockdowns. The World Health Organization went after it. The World Health Organization employees are now recommending these climate lockdowns. The countries that won't be affected, is China. As you say, as we're sitting home binge watching Netflix, we're not going to be able to have the freedoms we used to have. In the UK, they proposed CO2 ration cards that the government or employers would monitor your CO2 levels, you know, your energy use, your travel, the type of car you drive. If you exceed a level, you pay penalties. If you're under, you get credits. This is the world. A CO2 budget for every man, woman, and child on the planet has been proposed by a German climate advisor. This is what we're looking at. I talked to a German who talked about East Germany. They used to have these kind of restrictions in East Germany before you could leave the country. But we're talking about proposing these now on Americans within the country. And we had this, of course, with COVID. They were talking about bans on interstate travel at one point, a national ban, some of Biden's advisors. So anything is possible. Chuck Schumer is urging Biden to declare a national climate emergency. Just like a blue state governor, he could have emergency powers.
I feel such deep shame that Americans complied with what we've just been through, and I hope that they will not comply with this.
We will use fear as our weapon. We will establish their governments and establish opposites within. We will own both sides. We will always hide our objective, but carry out our plan. They will perform the labor for us, and we shall prosper from their toil. Our families will never mix with theirs. Our blood must be pure, always, for it is the way. We will keep them separated from the oneness by dogma and religion. We will control all aspects of their lives. We will make them kill each other when it suits us, and tell them what to think and how. We will guide them kindly and gently, letting them think they are guiding themselves. We will incite animosity between them through our factions. When a light shall shine among them, we shall extinguish it by ridicule or death, whichever suits us best. We will make them rip each other's hearts out and kill their own children. We will accomplish this by using hate as our ally, anger as our friend. Hate will blind them totally, and never shall they see that from their conflicts we emerge as their rulers. They will be busy killing each other. They will bathe in their own blood and kill their neighbors for as long as we see fit. We will benefit greatly from this, for they will not see us, for they cannot see us. We will continue to prosper from their wars and their deaths. We shall repeat this over and over until our ultimate goal is accomplished. We will continue to make them live in fear and anger through images and sounds. We will use all the tools we have to accomplish this. The tools will be provided by their labor. We will make them hate themselves and their neighbors. This they must never know. We will always hide the divine truth from them, that we are all one. They must never know that color is an illusion. They must always think that they are not equal. Drop by drop, we will advance our goal. We will take over their land, resources, and wealth to exercise total control over them. We will trick them into accepting laws that will steal the little freedom that they have. We will establish a money system that will imprison them forever, keeping them and their children in debt. When they shall band together, we shall accuse them of crimes and present a different story to the world. For we will own all the media. We will use our media to control the flow of information and their sentiment in our favor. When they shall rise up against us, we will crush them like insects, for they are less than that. They will be helpless to do anything, for they will have no weapon. They must never learn this truth, for they will turn against us. For their work, they will be rewarded with earthly things and great titles, but never will they become immortal and join us. Never will they receive the light and travel the stars. They will never reach the higher realms, for the killing of their own kind will prevent passage to the realm of enlightenment. This they will never know. The truth will be hidden in their face. It will be so close that they will not be able to focus on it until it's too late. Oh yes, so grand will the illusion of freedom be that they will never know that they are our slaves. When all is in place, the reality that we have created from them will own them. This reality will be their prison. They will live in self-delusion. When our goal is accomplished, a new era of domination will begin. Their minds will be bound by their beliefs, the beliefs we have established from time immemorial. But if ever they find out that they are equal, we shall perish. This they must never know. If they ever find out that together they can conquer us, they will take action. They must never, ever find out what we have done, for if they do, we shall have no place to run, for it will be easy to see who we are once the veil has fallen. Our actions will have revealed who we are, and they will hunt us down, and no person shall give us shelter.
We're now demonetized on YouTube. Yes, this actually has happened. Now, YouTube says that they will be demonetizing any content that contradicts well-established scientific consensus around the existence and causes of climate change. You also can't buy ads for climate-denying content. And the reason is simple. Advertisers simply don't want their ads to appear next to this content, and publishers and creators don't want ads promoting these claims to appear on their pages or videos. Now, that means if you call it a hoax, a scam, deny long-term trends saying the climate is warming, deny greenhouse gas emissions or human activity contributing to climate change, your content can't be monetized. Now, if you talk about climate change-related topics, policies, impacts, and research, those are monetizable. So, simply put, climate deniers have lost all revenue streams on YouTube and Google, and do not be surprised if it becomes a banned topic.
Well, Klaus Schwab, a hard one to find. So before the World Economic Forum was created in 1971, Klaus Schwab's history was basically unknown. Some people thought he was a construct, that he was just a made-up persona. Some people didn't even think he exists.
Good morning.
I would argue that WEF is a front organization, just like Epstein was a front man. They're the front people for the same ideology.
About the prospects for a new world order now within our reach.
When I see how people who worship darkness, how they rise to power, it's extremely suspect.
Using the frameworks of my Sustainable Markets Initiative and the imperative of the Great Reset.
I mean, and we're taking things that are, genetically modified organisms, and we're injecting them in little kids' arms. We just shoot them right into the vein.
We are basically creating a prison for ourselves and every future generation because they want to create this technology that's never existed before and push everything to this point of singularity, but they don't know what it's going to do once it's there. Maybe it will hate them all. And so when groups like the World Economic Forum come out and say, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy, they're not talking about themselves. They'll own everything, you'll own nothing, and you'll have to be happy about it.
Because of the climate crisis, we only have a few months left. I love that you support the Green Deal, but it's not getting rid of fossil fuel. It's not going to solve the problem fast enough. A Swedish professor saying, we can eat dead people, but that's not fast enough. So I think your next campaign slogan has to be this: we got to start eating babies. We don't have enough time. There's too much CO2. All of you're a pollutant. Too much CO2. We have to start now, please. You are so great. I'm so happy that you're really supporting the Green Deal, but it's not enough. Even if we would bomb Russia, we still have too many people, too much pollution. So we have to get rid of the babies. That's a big problem. Just stopping having babies is not enough. We need to eat the babies. And this is very serious. Please give a response.
Thank you. No, thank you.
So one is that people eat too much meat, right? And if they were to cut down on their consumption on meat, then they would it would actually really help the planet. But people are not willing to give up meat. Yeah, some people will be willing to, but other people, they may be willing to, but they have a weakness of will. They say, wow, this steak is just too juicy. I can't do it. I'm one of those, by the way. So, but so here's the thought, right? So it turns out that we know a lot about, we have these intolerance to, for example, I have milk intolerance. And some people are intolerant to crayfish. So possibly we can use human engineering to make it the case that we're intolerant to certain kinds of meat, to certain kinds of bovine proteins. And there's actually analogs of this in life. There's this thing called the Lone Star tick, where if it bites you, you'll become allergic to meat. I can sort of describe the mechanism. So that's something that we can do through human engineering. We can kind of possibly address really big world problems through human engineering.
Agenda 21 defines itself as the comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, nationally, and locally by organizations of the United Nations systems.
It also elevates nature above man. And it contains something called the precautionary principle, where basically you're guilty until you're proven innocent.
Sustainable development is the philosophy designed to bring human beings across the globe under the full control of a narrow human elite.
It's a 40-chapter document to basically control the world.
is based entirely on socialist control mechanisms.
Sustainable developers have designed a global movement coordinated through a global to local action plan to create world government in accordance with certain objectives. These objectives include an end to national sovereignty, the abolition of private property, the restructure of the family unit, and increasing limitations and restrictions on mobility and individual opportunity.
The green goal includes the listings of what's not sustainable. A couple of the examples include private property.
728 lists fossil fuels.
Golf courses and ski lodges are not.
Consumerism.
Irrigation is not sustainable.
Paved roads.
Commercial agriculture.
Herbicides, pesticides. Elsewhere, it lists farmlands, pastures, grazing of livestock.
And the family unit. The focus of sustainable development is the abolition of private property, societal undermining of the family, and abandonment of the constitutional protection of unalienable rights as described in the Declaration of Independence. You see, I sat on the Santa Cruz Agenda 21 committees. Now, this was a lot of crazy ideas. This was back in the mid-90s. Crazy ideas I heard. Mother Earth's surface wasn't to be scratched. Human beings were to be concentrated into human settlement zones. Educational systems were to focus on the environment as the central organizing principle. All aspects of life were covered. Well, I went to these committees at the request of some people who told me that I needed to understand what was going on, and I came back and I said, this is craziness. This is so silly. It has no chance of having any effect on our society. Well, I was wrong.
Passport that you will have on your iPhone in a digital form. It entails just about everything. The digital identity is not just a passport that you will have on your iPhone in a digital form. It entails just about everything the government would like to know about you. And yesterday in the Dutch media, we saw a perfect example of what it could entail in the near future. We had the CEO of one of the largest Dutch banks say, why don't we start with a personal carbon credit? Oh. A carbon wallet, she called it, actually. Yeah. So right in line with the plans that the World Economic Forum people have for us. And she said it in a way that was particularly funny. She said, well, if everyone gets an individual personal carbon credit, why don't we make it so that rich people who, for example, want to go on holiday a little too often can buy personal carbon credit from other people who, for example, can't afford buying plane tickets or eating meat too often. So we can that way swap it out.
Oh, so if Bill Gates or Leonardo DiCaprio's carbon footprint is getting a bit too big, then some peasant living in his hovel up country somewhere can sell his, and he can't afford to go to Saint-Tropez, but he'll be able to sell his carbon allowance to Leonardo DiCaprio so Leonardo can park his yacht in Saint-Tropez for a couple of extra days.
Exactly right. That's it. So what will happen is the rich will get richer, the poor will get poorer, and they're saying it openly as if it's not a controversial thing at all. It's neo-feudalism. That's what it is. And they don't mind. You know, it's just, yeah, okay. Then they said, well, and it's just a thought experiment because obviously a lot of people were kind of upset about this communist ideal that they just presented to the people on TV as a good idea. So they said, oh no, it's a thought experiment. Well, we've heard that before.
Yeah, we've had too many thought, but it was interesting to see. As you were talking, we saw that banker. She was being interviewed on a Dutch radio show. And she got a little too relaxed and actually, as they say in America, said the quiet part out loud. You're not actually meant to, you're not actually meant, there she is. She's chatting in the radio studio and she just gets a little carried away and we went to announce. Now, you know, there's a bank vice president in Canada, I think it was the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, which is one of the biggest banks in Canada, said pretty much the same thing and sold it on. This is going to be so convenient because all your information will be centrally located. So we can save the planet. We're just going to keep track of how many miles you do in your car, whether you've taken one too many vacations in the Greek islands, if you're eating too many cheeseburgers. It'll all be centrally located, and that will make it all the more convenient for you.
Yeah, and they're being honest, so they're exposing their true agenda, because obviously the best way to get to a modern person's heart is to say that it's convenient for them. So yes, you won't have to carry all your different papers and your passports, but the downside of it is, and I hope that people will start to see this, that the government can shut you down. So you know, if you want to buy a burger, red screen, no Mark, not for you. That flight, not for you. Oh, but you can just buy it if you have enough money, right? So they're being very open and honest to what their goal is here. So we should take their words seriously and say, hell no. And instead, this woman going off on radio and saying exactly what she thinks. Now, we had backlash, right? So people were upset about it, but she's invited on national television tonight. So in an hour, she'll be sitting there talking about this great thought experiment, and then suddenly it's part of the debate. And it's accepted. Whereas I would say we should cancel these communists immediately and say, get the hell out of my private life. I'm no
expert on climate change. I'm no scientist. And what I'm going to say next is a great big turn-off. It's just that. Turning off anything you don't need, you're not using it. It's easier than you think to make a difference.
Delegates from around the world are flying into Nairobi for a conference sponsored by the UN to talk about global warming. Civil servants, professional NGO campaigners, carbon offset fund managers, environmental journalists and others will discuss every aspect of man-made climate change, from how to promote solar panels in Africa to the relationship between global warming and sexism. The conference lasts 10 days. The number of delegates exceeds 6,000.
The billions of dollars invested in climate science means there is a huge constituency of people dependent upon those dollars. And they will want to see that carry forward. It happens in any bureaucracy.
Where I live, we have a local council global warming officer. There's a huge tail out there of people who have, in one way or another, been recruited to join this particular bandwagon.
Anybody who stands up and says, hey, wait a minute, let's look at this coolly and rationally and carefully and see actually how much merit, how much this stands up, they will be ostracized.
Scientists, accustomed to the relative civility and obscurity of academic life, suddenly find themselves publicly attacked if they dare to challenge the theory of man-made global warming, vilified by campaign groups and even within their own universities.
It's the old English saying, if you stand up in the coconut shy, they're going to throw at you. So I understand that there's going to be some of that, but it gets pretty difficult and pretty nasty and very personal. And there have been, death threats and all sorts of things. And so I'm not doing it for my health.
These days, if you are skeptical about the litany around climate change, you're suddenly like as if you're a Holocaust denier. The environmental movement, really, it is a political activist movement. And they have become hugely influential at a global level. And every politician is aware of that today. Whether you're on the left, in the middle, or the right, you have to pay homage to the environment. The environmental movement has evolved into the strongest force there is for preventing development in the developing countries.
We are being told, don't touch your resource, don't touch your oil, don't touch your coal. That is suicide.
I think it's legitimate for me to call them anti-human. Like, okay, you don't have to think humans are better than whales or better than owls or whatever if you don't want to, right? But surely it is not a good idea to think of humans as sort of being scum. That it's okay to have hundreds of millions of them go blind or die or whatever. I just can't relate to that.
The theory of man-made global warming is now so firmly entrenched, the voices of opposition so effectively silenced, it seems invincible, untroubled by any contrary evidence, no matter how strong. The global warming alarm is now beyond reason.
There will still be people who believe that this is the end of the world, particularly when you have, for example, the chief scientist of the UK telling people that by the end of the century, the only habitable place on the Earth will be the Antarctic. And humanity may survive thanks to some breeding couples who move to the Antarctic. I mean, it's hilarious. It would be hilarious, actually, if it weren't so sad.